I want to thank Dr. Che Fauzia, the Vice President of the Malaysian Soil Science, for inviting me. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I could not be physically present, therefore I am taking the opportunity of using our IT facilities at Ohio State, who do a great job in preparing these presentations and communicating my message at your International Society of Soil Science meeting regarding soil security. The topic that I chose with discussion concerning the theme of your meeting with Dr. Fauzia is soil security and carbon sequestration. I want to begin with talking about International Year of the Soils 2015, which this is. The 68th UN General Assembly declared 2015 as the International Year of Soils with the objectives to create full awareness of civil society and decision makers about the fundamental roles of soils for humans' life, to advance full recognition of the prominent contribution of soils to food security, climate change adaptation and mitigation, essential ecosystem services, poverty alleviation, and sustainable development, and to promote effective policies and actions for the sustainable management and protection of soil resources. There are many other objectives that they had outlined, but I think these three are prominent and very generic, and I commend the Malaysian Society of Soil Science in celebrating International Year of the Soils. This is a great activity, and your leadership certainly has done a great job in recognizing the significance of the International Year of the Soils in organizing this conference. Soil security, which is the main theme, you need a definition. This is something that I came up with. You may or may not agree with the definition, but I think availability of an adequate amount of soil resources of an acceptable quality for human well-being, nature conservancy, provisioning of essential goods and services, and sustainable development is soil security. So I think this covers the basic tenets, and having said this as the definition of soil security, there are certain factors that impact soil security. One of them would be access to adequate amount of good quality soil. That's obviously very critical. The tenure rights for long-term availability, so the people can continue that land forever. And the appropriate physiography and landform, so that the soil slope aspect, slope angle, the landscape characteristics are quite important. Favorable climate for multiple land uses would be an important factor. The adequate availability of good quality water for supplemental irrigation and other agricultural activities, and high biodiversity for biogeophysicochemical and biogeochemical transformation. Both biogeophysical and biogeochemical transformation in soils would be a very important aspect. If you look at the interconnectivity of the soil security in relation to some of those factors that I just discussed, so soil security essentially is ecosystem goods and services, their provisioning and their continuity and their magnitude, and this would be affected by soil quality. The soil quality has several components: the physical quality, the chemical quality, the biological quality, and the ecological quality. The other factor which would be important would be environment quality, including climate variability, climate change, climate uncertainty, water resources, the amount, the quality of the water, the availability of the water, whether it's the surface or groundwater, and the physiography of the landscape characteristics. So that would be the environmental factor which will impact soil security. Then of course the biotic activity and diversity, both the soil biodiversity and the above ground biodiversity. Soil biodiversity, especially the microbial biomass, carbon. The favorable and healthy soil biota that makes soil a disease suppressive soil. The soil quality is such that it can suppress pathogens and pests. And then of course we have a human dimension, which is important because the social equity, gender equity, the political stability, the economic prosperity, the ethnic, cultural, or religious background. There are several issues of human dimension which are important. And when these factors interact together, that's what the interconnectivity is, that's what the nexus is. And Anthropocene, how the humans are impacting the landform, how the humans are impacting the planet Earth itself. Paul Crutzen, the Nobel laureate chemist, atmospheric chemist from Germany, came up with this concept. There is some controversy as to when the Anthropocene began. He thought it began in 1750 with the Industrial Revolution. I think many others, including myself, believe that as soon as the human began doing the agriculture, 10, 12, 15,000 years ago, that's when the Anthropocene began. The soil-water climate nexus, the climate-water biodiversity nexus, and of course the sustainable development goals to meet the human needs and aspiration. These are all interactive factors which impact soil security. The other is how soil security impacts the sustainability. Here you have x-axis in which you have security, which is political, economic, social, and environmental. You have security in terms of human, societal, national, regional, and international, and global. At the center of this is a good soil quality, a very good soil depth, high organic matter content, good horizonation, deep rooting depth, very good water nutrient retention and transmission, very high soil biodiversity, very high ability to provide and support multiple land uses. With this soil quality is impacted the water quality, or the water security, or the energy security, the climate security, the food security, the health and nutritional security, the environmental security, political security, and the national and global security. I like to emphasize that it is the soil security through soil quality that impacts indeed the national and global security. Very important point from the soil's perspective. Food security is one of the important components that is impacted by soil security. Food security in current context means sustainable intensification for advancing food security while reducing the environmental footprint of farming systems and preserving the soil for other ecosystem services such as mitigation of climate change by sequestering carbon, provision of clean water by denaturing and filtering the pollutants, protection of biological diversity, and provisions of energy. So these are many other ecosystem services, and the strategy therefore is to grow more from less. Grow more from less. That's sustainable intensification. Grow more from less land, more crop per drop of water, more yield per unit input of fertilizer and pesticide, and more production per unit of energy consumption. That's what sustainable intensification is. One of the outcome of that would be food security. Now we want to link the soil security as we have defined it, the factors and the process impacting it, to soil carbon. So let's think about humus. Waxman, as many of you know, very famous soil scientist of the 30s, he said the importance of humus in human economy seldom receives sufficient emphasis. Suffice to say that it clearly represents the most important source of human wealth on this planet. Nature has stored in and upon the earth, in the form of humus, the source of vast amount of readily available energy, a large part of carbon needed for life processes, and most of the combined nitrogen so much needed for plant growth. So that indicates the importance of humus, soil organic matter, to soil ecosystem services. Albrecht, who was president of the Soil Science Society of America in the 1930s, he said soil organic matter is one of our most important national resources. Its unwise exploitation has been devastating, and it must be given its proper rank in any conservation policy as one of the major factors affecting the levels of crop production in the future. So going back to almost 80 years, Albrecht stated that. Many of you understand the Arabic word elixir. It is based on the Arabic phrase al-aksir, which means the recipe. If we consider this Arabic word, soil organic matter has over the centuries been considered by many as an al-aksir. In English, elixir. Elixir, the original Arabic word. Organic matter is elixir of life. Ever since the dawn of history, some 8,000 or more years ago, man has appreciated the fact that dark soils, commonly found in river valleys and broad level plains, are usually productive soils. He also realized that at a very early stage, that color and productivity are commonly associated with organic matter derived chiefly from decaying plant materials. That was Allison. Some of you have seen his book, Allison in relation to soil organic matter content. The humus capital, Hans Jenny, he stated, I'm arguing against indiscriminate conversion of biomass and organic waste to fuels. These days we are talking about cellulosic ethanol as a biofuel. And I think those of you in Malaysia producing oil palm also know the fact that there's a great amount of carbon debt when you clear a forest and drain the peatlands and begin to cultivate them for oil palm and other purposes. And that loss of that soil carbon can be a problem. And Hans Jenny in 1980 stated that. He said the humus capital, which is sustainable, deserves being maintained because good soils are a national asset. They are a national asset because of the humus content, which is very critical. So if you try to look at the soil quality as a function of soil organic carbon pool, there are many properties which are improved by increase in soil organic carbon content. For example, cation exchange capacity. It increases with the increase in soil carbon pool. The nutrient pool in soil increases with soil carbon pool. Soil aggregation, soil structure and tilth improve with increase in carbon pool. The earthworm activity, microbial biomass carbon, soil biodiversity increases with the increase. Water infiltration rate, available water capacity. These are all properties which are increased with increase. In comparison to these properties, the bulk density decreases with increase in carbon pool. So whether it's a soil physical quality, which will be bulk density, available water by infiltration rate, soil biological quality, which will be earthworm, the soil chemical quality, the nutrient pool, the soil carbon sequestration, which will be an ecological component and nutrient cycling, etc. These all depend upon soil organic carbon. And there is a threshold level, about 1.5%, 1.1% in the root zone, below which these qualities are jeopardized. Crop yield, for example. Crop yield, here's an example from Argentina, from Artendia zorita, example from the Pampas. As the soil organic carbon pool increase in the root zone up to about 45 to 50 tons per hectare, megagram, the yield of wheat increases progressively up to that limit, which means if the carbon pool is lower, the crop yield is less. That is in fact correct. Every increase of ton of carbon in soil increases the yield of wheat by about 30-40 kilogram per hectare, but that of corn maybe 200 or 250 kilogram per hectare. So there is a very good relationship between agronomic productivity and crop yield in relation to soil organic carbon content. How much is the carbon pool in the soils of the world? There are several estimates. I made an estimate a few years back, about 15 years ago, that the soil organic carbon pool was that we have lost because of historic land misuse and soil mismanagement, about 80 megagram per hectare. There are other estimates. Ski Houghton said 40. IPCC estimated this is 2005, about 55. Peter Buring, he came up with a very large number, so did Wallace. I do not know if these numbers would be valid, but it seemed the general consensus that about 80 to 100 petagram or gigaton of carbon has been lost by past management, which means that we can sequester the carbon, which means the carbon that we have lost, we can replace it by appropriate management. So the soil carbon sequestration refers to the process of restoring depleted soil carbon through recommended land use and soil management practices. It is a recarbonization of the biosphere that we are talking about in terms of the soil carbon sequestration. So what are the several mechanisms of carbon sequestration from the atmospheric CO2? There are several options. There's a geologic sequestration, such as putting in the old oil wells, or in the unminable coal mines, or in the saline aquifer. There is also chemical sequestration, mineralization, converting CO2 into calcium carbonate or magnesium carbonate. There's the oceanic sequestration, injection of CO2 deep into the ocean floor, or using iron fertilization to grow phytoplankton as biotic environments. Then there's a biotic sequestration through afforestation, through reforestation, through maybe establishment of biofuel plantation, if that can be created as a positive carbon budget. And then there is a pedologic sequestration. That means the soil carbon increase. Increasing carbon in soil can be two components. You have organic carbon in agricultural soil, degraded soils, wetland soil, or there can be inorganic carbon such as sequestration of secondary bicarbonates. And then of course there's a biochar, which should come under the organic part, but there is quite a lot of emphasis these days on biochar. Now many people think that this part is small, finite, maybe 1 ton per hectare per year. Geologic sequestration, on the other hand, has a large potential, but there are several problems with geologic sequestration, and one of them is where people think the NIMBY syndrome. The NIMBY syndrome means not in my backyard. Nobody wants to get deep injection into about a mile deep or so into their own backyard, because it may have some unexpected environmental impacts beside being a high cost. So what are the components of the terrestrial carbon sequestration which will increase soil quality? The components are forest carbon, above ground detritus material, the terrestrial carbon, and the components can be soil carbon, which is organic carbon, inorganic carbon, different types of organic carbon, labile versus intermediate versus persistent fraction, and it's all inorganic, lithogenic and pathogenic carbonates. So we should try to find out what type of soil carbon sequestration would be most appropriate to soil security in a region, in a space of your choice where you are interested. So if we are talking about soil carbon sequestration, let's say we begin with a forested soil, and initially we have a 100% of the carbon pool. As we deforest, as we remove that forest, this carbon pool declines. In few years, it can come down to, like in temperate climate, and maybe in 50 years, it can come down to 50%. In the tropics, like in Malaysia, maybe this 50% can come down in about 10 years. I used to work in West Africa, Nigeria, and after deforestation, the decline in organic matter was so rapid that in about 10 years, I'll come down about 50% of what I started. If soil erosion is a problem, such as on sloping land, the depletion rate will continue. If the erosion can be stopped, the depletion rate can stabilize for the new land use after a time. Now, at some point in time, if you change the land use, adopt better practices, carbon pool in soil can be increased to a level which is what we call attainable potential. And at this point, if we can increase better land use and create a more positive carbon budget, we can reach the maximum potential. This maximum means you are getting to the original level. In some soils, such as tropical soils which may have phosphorus deficiency or perhaps imbalance of other nutrients, so in dry climate maybe lack of water, it's possible to go beyond the original level in using one technology or the other technology. It's possible, but most of the time we are really thinking about attainable potential, which is getting to about 2/3 of the original level. And most of the research, such as my laboratory, we calculate the rate of carbon sequestration as slope of this line. over time, delta y over delta x. This rate is about 1 ton per hectare under ideal condition, probably 1/3 of a ton per hectare under more normal condition, and maybe 50 kilogram or 100 kilogram per hectare under dry climatic condition. Compare that with inorganic carbon sequestration, we call pathogenic carbonates, probably 5 kilogram per hectare. So inorganic carbon about 5 kilogram per hectare, the organic carbon maybe 100 to 1000 kilogram per hectare depending on the soil and climate. And there are several practices that can help us achieve the so-called carbon sink capacity, which means the amount of carbon that we have lost, and also the profile characteristic, clay and silt content and other mineralogy and many other properties. There are several options to achieve that, such as no-till, integrated nutrient management and increasing nutrient use efficiency, growing cover crops, adding biochar, agroforestry, maybe desertification control, afforestation, pasture management, water harvesting, drip sub irrigation. There are many options. The important part to remember is that each of these options have their own carbon footprint. Nothing is free. These techniques have their own carbon footprint, whether it is through herbicides and pesticides or fertilizers or many other things. So we must find out a site-specific situation which has the least carbon footprint. That means the net rate of carbon sequestration would be more, and also the mean residence time we must consider. We must consider which of these practices will have more mean residence time of the carbon that has been sequestered, so it does not go back into the atmosphere at the same time. One other thing which is very important, we had an article that we published, several of my colleagues, Ken Olson and others, in Soil Science America in 2014. This process of carbon sequestration must occur within the same landscape unit. The same landscape unit is a very important criteria. Otherwise, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. So everything must happen within the plant growing within the same landscape unit. Now, this concept I just presented, we can also look at through sustainable intensification as I described in the beginning, such as through conservation agriculture, agroforestry, micro irrigation, integrated nutrient management, precision farming, farming system analysis, genetically modified plants, the nexus approach of interconnectivity, looking at the nutritional sensitive soil, and there may be many other components. The fact is, just as I said, each of these is what we call developing climate resilient agricultural system. Some people call it climate smart. I think climate smart is a more political and common language. Climate resilient is really what we are talking about. Has the ability of a system to bounce back, like an elastic system, bounce back when the stress is removed. That's a resilience, that's elasticity. But any of these techniques have a trade-off. They have their own carbon footprint, and we must think about that. From the nutritional point of view, improving not only the food security, that the caloric input, but also alleviating hidden hunger. The focus of that is the nutrition sensitive agriculture. Can we improve the protein nutrition of the humanity? Can we improve the micronutrients, iron, zinc, copper, molybdenum, selenium, iodine, many other, through nutritional sensitive agriculture? And this is the kind of thing we want to think about. Now, none of those components can be free. As I mentioned, they have a cost. Farmers have to put in the crop residue, fertilizer, nutrients, therefore trading carbon credit and just payment to farmers for ecosystem services. At an article in the Journal Soil and Water Conservation in the November-December issue of 2014, we talk about societal value of soil carbon. And I came up that the farmer should be paid something like $40 per hectare per year. $40 per hectare per year for carbon sequestration in the soil through those management techniques, because they have to create a positive carbon and nutrient budget. That means the carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, manure residue should be more, leading to positive carbon budget Then the loss is through erosion, leaching and decomposition, and this balance is really what we are looking for, because you can manage what you can measure. You can manage what you can measure. I think that's one of the phrase. So the management of soil carbon can become more easy to understand and implement if we can quantify it. That's the message that we want to get. Technological options from the agricultural point of view on a global scale. I'm going to show you a historic graph here beginning from 1750 to now. I put a population on this side in billions, and here on this side I have put cereal yield. Cereals such as corn, for example, we grow in Ohio quite a lot of corn. So let's say from 1750 to about 1850, in the US and Malaysia and many other places, hand tools were the common. The crop yield was about 1 ton per hectare. The population was not quite a billion people. It was about a billion people, as you remember, during the time of Darwin's. Then came animal power from 1850 to about 1950. The population was about 2 billion on a global scale. The crop yield we were able to get about, through animal power and rotation, about 4 tons per hectare. Then we had the green revolution of 60s and 70s. Mechanization came into existence. The fertilizer, germplasm, irrigation, the crop yield went up to about 6 to 7 ton, and the population reached in 19 about 4 billion people. Then we have from 1975 to 2000 improved crop cultivars, biotechnology, no-till farming came into that, integrated nutrient management, pest management. We began to do research on carbon sequestration. The population went to 6 billion, the productivity about 8 tons per hectare. Now the current era from 2000 to 2015, we are right now in 2015, year of the soil. Conservation agriculture, micro irrigation, precision farming, perennial culture, complex rotation, genetically modified organisms. And with that, we are getting to the population about 7.5 billion and productivity about 12 tons per hectare. In fact, the crop yield in Ohio, corn yield is about 12 tons per hectare. But we must continue increasing. By 2025, the population is going to be 8 billion. To feed that population, the crop yield should be about 13 to 14 tons per hectare. A resilient system, remember climate resilient agriculture, sustainable intensification, rhizosphere processes, creating disease suppressive soils, soil-less culture. Can we grow food in large urban center without soil, such as using hydroponics, aquaponics, aquaculture? Even if we can produce only 10% of the food consumed in large urban city, which can be 70% population by 2050, that's a very important part. Sky farming, having large skyscrapers made of glass, where the urban grey water and black water containing nutrients can be recycled to produce food locally. Recarbonization of the biosphere, the nexus approach. These are some of the technology that will, and then of course from 2025 to 2050, by the time the population is going to be 9.5 billion, the crop yield should be about 15 megagram per hectare or more. Nutrition sensitive agriculture, sustainable intensification, soil-less culture, restorative agriculture, extraterrestrial soils. We should learn Moon and Mars and how, if we develop colonies in those regions, how can we grow food on those places? Extraterrestrial soil management. Soil scientists should get actively involved. NASA is doing research on that, but not by soil scientists. And therefore, Soil Science Society of Malaysia and International Union of Soil Science should really encourage soil scientists to get involved in things extraterrestrial. Recarbonization of the soil and the biosphere, biodynamic agriculture. This will be again space type of agriculture. And of course, the nexus approach, the interconnectivity. So these are some of the technology that will help us achieve soil security. Soil security will be achieved through that. Here is the future agriculture may look like. You have a plant. That plant may be genetically modified. It may have a Bt gene. As long as the toxicity is acceptable, we need to do some more research about that, no question. But this is something that we really can't do without. The nutrient, phosphorus, carbon, zinc, nitrogen, and water must be delivered directly to the roots without losses. so that the uptake, the use efficiency is much higher, so that the use efficiency of those nutrients is much, much higher. Right now the use efficiency of nitrogen is hardly 30, 40, 50%. We need to make it much, much greater. Water use, flood irrigation, the efficiency is barely 20%. We must change that. So we are talking about how to change the flux from soil to the atmosphere. Can we put more carbon in soil? That's the idea. So that we can counteract, we can balance, offset the fossil fuel. So that's the environmental factor that alters the rates of carbon and nitrogen turnover must be understood in terms of achieving climate change mitigation through soil security. We have different parts of the world where that possibility exists. Sub-Saharan Africa, we have some land area available. On a global scale, these are on a continental basis. On a global scale, we have about 2.37 gigahectare, that's 10 to the 9 hectare billion hectare available for creating a positive carbon sink in the soil and the ecosystem for carbon sequestration through better management. The technical sink capacity, technical, that's the maximum, not the attainable. Attainable is much lower. Cropland have about 1 gigaton of carbon, rangeland another gigaton, total about 3 gigaton. Maybe even half of that if we can actually attain it through soil security. That would be a good way to improve. Another concept which is important is the endangered soil. Some of the soil which are eroded, peat soils in Malaysia, for example, being over-cultivated, they can be endangered soils. Soils which have lost their surface horizon. Very important concept of endangered soils. Peak soil, like peak oil. There could be peak soil. We are running out of good soil, so they're reaching a peak. Pardon me. The mission impossible. A mission impossible, not mission impossible. Between 1850 and 2000, we emitted 300 gigaton. Between 2000 and 2100, we'll be emitting between 1000 and 2200 gigaton. Rate of the emission in 1990, fossil fuel was 5.5 gigaton of carbon per year. In 2100, the rate may be 20 to 30. Can we offset this through soil carbon sequestration? No, it's not possible. This is just far too much. We cannot. We can maximum do, if you have a total soil carbon pool to 2 meter depth or 2500 petagram, and you increase soil carbon percent as an assumption by 1%, that's 24 petagram. 1 petagram translates into 0.47 parts per million. Therefore, carbon sink capacity of increasing organic matter content, carbon content in soil by 1% is 11 parts per million of drawdown of CO2 in the atmosphere. If you can increase this by 5%, you are talking about 55 to 60 parts per million. That is about the capacity. That's the maximum that we can do. So, can the global warming entirely mitigated by soil carbon sequestration, or to that matter soil carbon security? The answer is no. It's not possible. Should the soil carbon sequestration be done? The answer is yes, because soil carbon sequestration has many benefits. Now, soil carbon as an indicator of climate change is a very important factor to defining soil security, as I defined in the beginning, why it's a familiar property. It involves direct measurement. It can be measured in 4 dimensions, length, width, depth, and time. It lends itself to repeated measurement over the same site. It's linked to ecosystem performance and services. It's a key driver of soil formation. It's important to soil fertility. It has a memory. Yes, we can date the soil carbon. It has well-defined properties. It can be used in a synergism with the other indicators. Its uncertainty can be quantified. Its pathways across the landscape can be followed. It's an important archive of paleo environment. So soil carbon concentration and quality is the indicator of soil security. Soil security and soil carbon go together. So if you look at an icon, I noticed that on a global issue, some people think of a polar bear as an icon, or as a tortoise as an icon, or if it's a world wildlife fund, it's a panda as an icon, or chimpanzee, or bald eagle. The fact is, the real global icon that we are looking for in the International Year of the Soil, and that I'll urge the Malaysian Society of Soil Science to think about it, is really the soil. The soil in its entirety, equilibrium with its flora and fauna, including the fauna, flora, the termites, the vegetation, the animals, the crop that we grow in their soil, the human interaction, the human dimension of it, and of course the subsoil part, the rhizosphere processes, which is of water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, their cycling, their interaction with one another, their interaction with management, and how soil biota, earthworm, the millipede, centipede, the termite, the rodents, how do they all interact and influence these processes? A very important part. I like to use this icon as an indication of global need. I think United Nations Year of the Soil should say that the icon that we are looking for improving human well-being and nature conservancy is really the soil. It is this icon. Why it is this? Because soil is life and life is soil. And this is the message I'd like to leave with you in your conference at the International Year of the Soil 2015. Once again, at the end, I thank you for providing me the opportunity to talk to you. I wish you excellent deliberation on this very important topic of global significance, and wish you all the best in your endeavor to achieve the objective as you set out for yourself. Thank you.